Welcome to the UKRunChat Podcast. Before we get into today's episode, just a quick note. This conversation with Catherine and Pippa was recorded back in December. Since then, Trail and Bloom has officially launched, and there may be a few references in the conversation to launching soon or upcoming races. But everything else that they share about midlife running, confidence and strength training is just as relevant, if not more so now. I really hope you enjoy the conversation, and the website is now live for you to go and have a look at what they're planning this year. Welcome to the UKRunChat Podcast. I'm Michelle, and today I'm chatting with two guests about how to navigate running, identity and wellbeing as a woman in midlife. I'm joined by Catherine and Pippa, who are the team behind Trail and Bloom, which is a new trail running retreat designed specifically to support women through this chapter of life. Both have very powerful personal stories, which we'll hear about. So today we'll talk about why midlife can feel both like a breaking point and a breakthrough, and how trail running can help rebuild our confidence. Hi, Catherine and Pippa. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, before we get into individual stories, can you tell us how did your paths cross, and when did you realise that you had a shared vision for supporting women in this period of their lives?
So our paths crossed. We have our eldest children, or Pippa's middle child and my eldest child, are in the same class at school. So we knew each other originally from the school gates, and I had always known that Pippa was, very strong runner, a prolific athlete, etc. And then I restarted a running journey in my early 40s, and then decided to take on London Marathon. So I approached Pippa at that point to work with her as a running coach. So we had a personal relationship and then a professional relationship that's just continued to grow since then, really.
Oh, that's lovely. Pippa, do you want to just give us a little bit of your background then before we kind of dive into the rest of it?
Yeah, so I am not a lifetime athlete at all by any means. I was a horse rider when I was younger, but I kind of didn't really do a lot of school sports. At school, sports was a bit elitist. If you weren't at the top of your game, you were excluded. You didn't get to do match days and stuff, and that was me really. And then through my teenage years, I guess because I didn't really have an outlet physically, I had struggles with eating disorders and like a terrible relationship with food until my mid-20s, really. And I only really discovered running after my daughter was born, so in 2016. So I'll have been running 10 years next year. And I started running, I think a lot like a lot of people do, to lose weight and feel better, and I didn't really know what that meant. And I was ashamed, I guess. I was 16 stone when I started running, and had a poor relationship with food, alcohol, what I now know were undiagnosed ADHD symptoms. So I've since received an ADHD diagnosis. Suboptimal relationship with my children's father, and just ended up running to cope and improve my life. And it genuinely did that in buckets and more, and has completely changed me as a person, really. And so I started training with some people locally, who were running a half marathon at the weekend for fun, and I was just kind of having a glass of wine and feeding my child, and that was a win for me at the time. And I gradually kind of fell in with that crowd, I guess. Started running 10Ks and half marathons, and you know what it's like, you kind of just carry on. And so then next thing, I was doing Edinburgh Marathon and Chester, and then I got in the pool and started swimming and realised I'd actually swum quite well. Despite popular opinion, when I was younger, I wasn't the best, but I'd been taught to swim really well. And the next thing I knew, I was doing an Ironman, and where I'd ridden horses, I had really good quads, and so the bike is my strongest discipline. did an Ironman, and then thought, well, I could be competitive with this, and so I just kind of set about it. And then lockdown and divorce and homeschooling and all of that stuff, and I gradually kind of halved my distance and kept halving it until I got to standard distance triathlon. Found a bit of speed again, qualified for the GB team, and ended up at the Europeans in Poland in 2022, where I came sixth. Pre-qualified for the next year, and then along came a baby, and I had to withdraw from everything. Ran through my pregnancy, and stayed quite fit. And then British Triathlon very kindly introduced the pregnancy deferral scheme, of which I believe I'm probably one of the first to uptake on that. So I now have a place at the Worlds next year in Pontevedra, which I'm training for quite seriously now. And yeah, I guess that's me. That's trail running. I started trail running, oh gosh, when I was marathon training, really to take the pressure off the pace in the middle of long runs, and so I could run with my dogs. Because when I was just road running, I was finding I was going out on a run and then I'd have to come back and walk the dog, and it just didn't sit well. And so I started trail running with my Labrador at the time. He's no longer with us. But then in 2021, I bought myself a Cocker Spaniel as a running buddy. And then we had a litter off her. Was it last year? Yeah, last year. Catherine had one of the litter. So we have puppies who are sisters.
Oh, that's cute.
And they are equally crazy, but we do a lot of trail running with them, letting off some steam, and so it's sort of grown into a lot of trail running and a lot of having fun, really.
Yeah, wow. It's amazing that you managed to fit all that in. But as you say, I guess running with the dog does help, doesn't it? But training for kind of the Worlds must take up a lot of your time.
I'm quite strong on the bike. It's the bike, something that I've my coach is a lady called Angela Joyner Handy, and she's actually one of the facilitators on our retreats as well. She has some championships under her belt for multisport and also powerlifting, and she's not really she's agreed to let me park the bike apart from one session a week until January, because the run is actually my weakest, and if I don't train the run, I struggle. The swim, I can get in the pool and swim, and I haven't lost a lot, and the same on the bike. So actually, strategically, I'm mainly running and doing strength at the moment, and that saves me a lot of time, because the run's a lot tougher than the others, and you get a lot more bang for your buck, really. So that's how I'm managing it at the moment. But I'm under no illusions that in the new year I'm going to be having to find somewhere to swim, which where we live it's not particularly accessible, and that adds a lot of travel time. And then the bike obviously takes a bit longer to get the same training effect. So I'm going to be having to step up in the new year.
Yeah, we've a lot to think about. Thank you for that wonderful kind of introduction to yourself, Pippa. Catherine, do you want to kind of give us your background now and tell us how you got into finding a love for the trails?
Yeah, no, thank you. There's actually similarities between our stories, I think, obviously at different levels. But I had a very, very similar disconnection as a child. I was a club swimmer. So spent the best part of 10 years really in the pool most days. And that was very much my social circle. And all I knew growing up, really. But it was a different time. This is kind of mid to late 80s and early 90s. And I was always made to feel that I wasn't good enough, really, to be part of that club. I certainly was never picked for any competitions, and certainly made to feel inferior at times. And a lot of that was associated to kind of how I looked. I was an overweight child, and it created quite a lot of negative talk around your body, how it looked and how it performed, and therefore that I wasn't good enough because of how I looked and how I performed. So the emphasis really wasn't on the enjoyment of sports, and the fact that anyone can enjoy moving their body and derive pleasure and enjoyment from it. It always felt like punishment because I just wasn't good enough, and it didn't matter how hard I worked, I still wasn't good enough to make the grade. So for me, that led to a really negative association with exercise, but also a deep rooted disconnection between myself and exercise as well. And that carried on into adulthood. Similar challenges around food, which I, quite honestly, we'll talk about my struggles still today, really, but a real negative connection with food as well. And my recourse for exercise was always as a punishment for overeating, and not feeling good enough again, and all that negative self-talk. And I first kind of migrated into running, I suppose, in my 20s, because there were a lot of people doing it then. It was sort of the start of like running events being really popular. So I thought, I'll have a go. And I actually got okay, an average middle of the pack runner. Quite happy. I got a 2-hour half during that time. But showing up on that start line, I had all of those feelings around, am I thin enough? And do I look the right way to be partaking in this event? And I wouldn't enter competitions if I didn't feel that, I couldn't fit into my race gear, So I'd show up on those start lines having that real deep disconnect around really the wrong mentality, sort of starting that line thinking that if I wasn't going to finish quick enough, it was because I wasn't good enough, instead of starting on that start line thinking, this is amazing, this training block has got me to where I need to be, and this should be a celebration of what I can achieve. So of course it failed, that negative talk, it just failed. So again, I fell out of love with running. Also life intervened, kids came along, the whole shebang. And then I noticed, just as my children were getting older, and particularly my eldest, Kiara, who takes after me genetically. And I was very mindful of, I wanted her to have a different association with exercise as she grew older, and a different association with her body image as well, as she grew older. So that kind of caused me to sort of up my game a little bit. And I hit 40 and I said, no, now's the time to do it properly. So I started running again, and really enjoyed it. And actually then everything became an enjoyment of what I could do. I was like, okay, now I'm 42 and I'm just running my first marathon. This is pretty cool. And that's sort of what led me to running this time. And then so I did a couple of marathons, did London Marathon and Brighton Marathon. And then I hit probably 43, and I noticed everything started to feel different. Everything started to feel harder. I was trying to push faster goals, and improve on times, but everything felt so much more difficult. Life just felt more difficult as well. The kids need you in a slightly different way as they get older. And that mental challenge I find quite heavy. As you notice the kids getting older, the needs change from physical to mental. And that obviously impacts onto you as a parent mentally too. And then obviously your parents are getting older as well. And that brings worry and stress and concern. And it feels like you're just you're just in a pressure cooker from every angle. And my kind of coping mechanism of running wasn't working either, because I'd find that I'd go for a run and I'd get frustrated and angry that I wasn't getting better. And then a whole heap of injuries ensued through lack of consistency as well. And I've really been battling now minor niggles for probably the best part of 18 months. And actually, that's when I had a chat with Pip and went, you know what, something's got to change. Otherwise, I'm just going to stop completely and I'm going to go back to how I was before. And I don't want that to happen. So I think 2 years ago, pretty much to the day, Pippa took me out on my first trail run.
So you introduced Catherine to the trails, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I did. I've still got, I think it was it the 20, I was pregnant with Frances, so 29
November, yeah.
September 23.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And even on that first run, we were talking about it this morning at something else, but even on that first run, I remember kind of getting stressed out at one point going, oh my gosh, it just took me, 13 minutes to run that last mile. And Pippa just literally turning around going, it doesn't matter. Like, you're on the trails. It doesn't matter. Just slow down, enjoy the view, take your time. There was no such thing as too slow on the trails. And to have someone sort of challenge me in that moment was quite an epiphany, really. And I was a bit like, oh, okay. I hadn't really thought about it like that. And then I've just kind of done more and more over the past 2 years, really. So again, as Pippa mentioned before, her eldest spaniel had a litter at the beginning of last year, March last year, which coincided with me doing Brighton Marathon as well. And I remember sitting on the beach in Brighton the day after the marathon, just watching the sea and having a coffee before I had to drive home. And a Springer Spaniel bounded along the beach and came running up the beach to me and bounced on you as only a spaniel can, and started covering me with kisses and licks and everything else. And then as I got back into the car on the way back to Brighton, on my way back from Brighton, I said to Pippa, right, I think that's a sign. I think we're going to get one of your spaniels. And then that was it. I was then committed to, obviously, as
they
Pippa
must
said,
have been 4 weeks old then. Like, something,
yeah.
Didn't have to work too hard for that.
No, and I think it was just, as Pippa said then, it's the efficiency of fitting everything in. The dog needs a walk, and if I'm going to go for a run, well, the dog comes on a run with me, and it's two birds, one stone, and then that naturally forces you out onto the trails. So we've had, best part of 2 years now of exploring all the trails around us with our spaniels.
So what's different about trail running that you love so much then? That's a question for both of you, really.
For me, it is the pressure that's taken off from the road. So for me, it's the pressure that's taken off, the ability for you to go slow, the freedom that comes with it, of like that release from you. You're just like, oh, okay, well, I'm out to enjoy the ride here, and that's absolutely fine. There's no pressure there. It's the flexibility that each run gives you, in the sense that if you're just running around your village or your town or your local routes, you end up getting tired of those routes very quickly. Even if you do the same route out on the trails, you do it one day, it's completely different to you doing it another day. So it's the sort of sense of adventure as well that comes from each run being ever so slightly different. And you're never really entirely sure what's going to happen. So, who's going to fall over? Normally it's me. Who's going to fall over? Which field are we going to meet cows in? Whose dog are we going to lose? Again, that's probably going to be mine. And each story is slightly different, and it gives you that sense when you finish of almost that sense of you can pretty much do anything, because you've done something that's a lot more challenging than perhaps going on the road. It challenges you both physically and mentally, and helps build your resilience as a result. For me personally, that's what I take from it.
Yeah. What about you, Pippa?
Well, I started trail running for the dog, firstly, but also I think because I was training as a running coach, and I was also pushing myself into 2 marathons back to back, sort of a 16-week training block apart, within 2 years of starting running, which I was just very aware, with a science background, was a bit stupid. And so it was one of these things, I did to take the pressure off the pace, because I could feel myself getting a bit obsessive about the pace. And the telltale signs, you're sort of going out for an easy run, and you want your easy run to be a 9-minute mile. You want it to be a 9-minute mile, but your heart rate is saying otherwise, and you're ignoring your actual heart rate because you want your pace to be. And it's that kind of, I couldn't stop that internal dialogue, and in line with what Catherine was saying, it's one way to switch it off. You can't guess on the trails. It was the adventure as well. At the time when I was running marathons, I was a relative newbie, and there was a great bunch of girls at the time all going out and training for ultras. So I had lots of people around me who could show me local routes that I could sort of tag together, and I learned that way. Also, I think just from coaching knowledge and scientific knowledge is, if you've got any nuances in your stride, you're constantly varying where you put your feet, and you have to, your stride is longer and shorter and wider and narrower, and it kind of, to a certain extent, mitigates against the risk of injury, and builds up all of those stabilizing muscles at the same time. So I probably falsely told myself that I could do less strength work if I went out on the trails, because I was doing an all-round workout with on the trails. I know that's not true, but it was one way I kind of trained at the time. But it's just become, I think it adds another sense of novelty as well for me. Like, if I really, we all have days where you're kind of you feel like you're dragging your bus out of the door, and I will always go through a mental process if I feel that way of, well, what can I do to add, an ADHD brain thrives on novelty. Can I wear a different pair of shoes? Can I do that route backwards? Can I, how can you change this to make it interesting in some way, just to keep that habit going? And I've switched so many road runs for trails because it's just got me out doing something. So yeah, I think the sense of novelty as well for me is what keeps it going.
Yeah, they definitely bring a sense of kind of adventure and fun as well, the trails, don't they? And like what you were saying, Catherine, about every run being kind of different, even throughout the seasons and from week to week. Pippa, will you do a lot of your kind of marathon training on the trails then? Will that help or will that hinder, do you think?
I did for my second back-to-back block of marathon training, I did every single long run on trails with dogs. When I want speed work, I'll keep the surface solid. I take hill reps off road a lot. I find it's really, to a certain extent, you can measure your progress by doing the same thing on the same surface each time. But sometimes, like, just to get away from that pressure, if you put too much pressure on yourself for speed sessions, it's counterproductive. And so if I need to do a hill rep session, I'll often go on trail because it gives the dogs a good workout. Then hill reps on trail are so much steeper. And this, with the surface being what it is at the moment, especially, it's really hard to even grip. So it's a completely different workout. And but you can easily max out your heart rate on a hill rep, like in this part of the world, much easier than on road. So I like to keep it interesting. I think it really helps to keep it interesting.
Yeah. So I just want to go back to what I think both of you alluded to it when you were chatting about your own kind of backstories. And, where does all that baggage, we come with a lot of baggage about running, don't we? And identity by the time we hit our 40s. I think it's really sad. I'm sure there'll be a lot of women out there nodding along. I know I am. I had a similar experience to you both, with kind of starting running to lose weight and then finding that it can actually be fun, and for me, again, it was once I got a dog, I was like, oh yeah, this is brilliant. But there's a lot coming at us in this period of our lives. So how can we kind of find that confidence in ourselves? I guess I'm kind of leading into what you're kind of planning with Trail and Bloom, aren't I? Because you haven't quite launched yet. You are about to launch any day now.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about where that idea came from and how you're hoping to help women just find some confidence and find a joy for running again.
For me, so the idea for Trail and Bloom probably started about a year ago, and you know, for that, the transformational effect that running in nature had on me, through Pippa's guidance, I just couldn't help but feeling that there must be other people that would benefit from that in some way. And again, you know, in terms of that sort of coping mechanism of dealing with life's stresses and challenges, everything feels so much better. Like, you know, we talk about entering flow, don't you, once you kind of in the zone on a run. And it just gives me great moments of clarity when I'm in that period. So if I'm grappling with a problem at work or at home, then going for a run out on the trails really helped me just find a solution where I could just be sitting here pulling my hair out otherwise. So I just felt like there had to be more people that would benefit from that. I recognise I was exceptionally lucky. You know, Pippa's a good friend. We've worked together, etc. To be able to kind of tap into that resource, and I know from speaking to friends who are runners, they never go on the trails because they wouldn't even know where to start. So not only that they don't necessarily know the benefits because they've not done it, but they just wouldn't know where to start. Like if you'd asked me 2 years ago, well, how do I run off road? Like physically, how do you plan it? How do you know where to go? You know, what tech do you use or otherwise to plan? If you don't have a dog and you don't walk a dog, then you wouldn't necessarily know all the routes through the field. So where do you start? And like I said, I was very lucky that Pippa was able to kind of guide me. She'd had influence from other people before who helped her with some of the routes locally. And that knowledge just got passed down and passed on. And we see that a lot. You know, we've got friends in our community now that have started running and then trail running because of that, and that knowledge just gets passed on. So it was really kind of bringing together a group of women that perhaps never have tried trail running before, or maybe have tried it but aren't optimizing what they're doing on the trails, or they've hit that part of their life similar to me where things start to feel different. So how to again adapt their training sustainably. So yeah, it's bringing together a community of experts to help women carve that time out for midlife and develop them through midlife and develop those sustainable training habits, and actually, you know, get over the hurdle of being out on the trails and off road. Because for me particularly, you know, it's a deeply personal story, but for me particularly, being out on the trails, when you come back having done a trail run, you feel so resourced and resilient to be able to deal with stuff that some of those problems that you were facing before you went, not only do you kind of have sort of those moments where you get clarity on the run, but actually those problems seem so small and insignificant when you realise out in the big open world, and all, across those open natural landscapes, how small you are in the grand scheme of things. So it gives you a sense of grounding and perspective. So yeah, really we're working with Pippa, obviously with all of her expertise, but bringing other experts in together on those retreats to help people face those challenges in midlife.
Yeah, and anything to add to that, Pippa, from your perspective?
I think from my point of view, what we are trying to offer is really unique in the environment that we're hoping to bring people into. The acceptance and self-acceptance, the positivity, but also the feeling that they are supported by people who really know what they're doing. So me personally, I'm a women's health and performance coach. I have postgraduate qualifications in clinical research and nutrition, and then sports coaching qualifications. And I've sort of more recently been working towards launching online courses. In one of those is data-driven wellness, and then the other one is a course that takes people on a journey so that at the end of it they can end up with a training plan that they've designed themselves. It's personalized and it's based on their own personal data. And for these retreats, I'm hoping to deliver versions of those courses live, so that not only does it give women who are on our retreats the confidence to get out on the trails and find a new kind of way of exercising, but it also breaks down those barriers in terms of training in itself, and gives them the confidence they need to know that the training they're doing is the right thing for their body. I think we have a lot of fear around training and misconceptions around training, that it has to be go hard or go home. It has to be painful. It has to be almost something intimidating. But actually, I'm working really hard with others from the industry to kind of reframe that, and so that we can start to see training as something that is conducive to our longevity and our health span. It's not something we do in spite of ourselves, but it's something that actually we really need to be doing to ensure that we maintain muscle mass into our later years, our independence, our and I think there's a lack of understanding around maintaining muscle mass and the huge array of benefits that can bring, especially in midlife, in terms of hormone regulation, energy balance, metabolism, and sleep and stress, and all of these things. And if from my point of view, if there was one there isn't a golden ticket, but if there was a golden ticket, if you could find the most important thing you could do for yourself in midlife, it would be to maintain that muscle mass that's inevitably going to decline from about the age of 35 to 40. And helping people do that, I think, is really important, and helping them to understand what that means. So underpinning trail survival and being able to enjoy getting out on the trails and being supported by a community of like-minded women, we really want the evidence base and the science behind it, to help people. I hate the word educate because it can be patronizing, but to help people to understand their bodies better and understand what's actually going on at that phase of life scientifically as well as emotionally and socially.
Yeah, no, that's great, because there's a lot of nonsense out there, isn't there, on social media, and it's always telling us we need to be smaller, we need to be lighter, we need to weigh less.
So yeah, and it really is that age old. I'm from my point of view, I'm looking at my mum's generation now, and they were the generation of the calorie deficit diet and the Rosemary Conley and just eat less and move more. But what we don't understand is that when we eat less, we have less opportunities to nourish our body and to get the right nutrition. And when you non-specifically cut out calories, if you're cutting out calories, they can be made of anything. And when you're doing that, you're losing weight, but weight is made up of muscle and fat. And so you might be losing fat, but you're also losing muscle. And the less muscle you have, the lower your metabolic rate, and therefore the less you can eat. And so you're sort of pigeonholing yourself into this giant trap that's very, very difficult to get out of, this non-specific weight loss. And it's not until relatively fairly recently that we've understood the value of body composition. Probably, the exception to that is the sports world, where that's always, it's always been something that is important. But for non-athletes, the importance of body composition is not something that's talked about an awful lot, and it's steadily on the rise now, but that's sort of, it's one of my missions, is to get people to understand that non-specific weight loss is a detrimental thing to do, and as much as I think we've moved forward and we're getting the message out there about maintaining muscle, it doesn't seem to be budging, largely because now we have the GLP-1 fashion, and that's again another non-specific weight loss mechanism, albeit very effective, but it's the short-term wins that we're still going for, and that it really it saddens me actually to see that there's another global round of this, and that the message clearly isn't catching on. So
you're nodding along there, Catherine. Have you anything to kind of add to
I mean,
that
it's just,
conversation?
and I know Pippa referred to her mum's generation, but it's like she could be rewriting my whole teenage and early adult life, and through my 30s as well, that cycle of restriction, to lose weight, to hit a number on a scale.
And this was mine as well. This was, I was through my teens, I was an anorexic, and that was driven, I believe, through misinformation. All I wanted to know was what to eat to be healthy, and how to control I wanted to control something. It was definitely not based on nothing, but a huge part of that was not knowing what to eat for the best, and being influenced by all of this calorie deficit stuff, not understanding the importance of muscle mass. And I, to this day, feel that if I had the right the information that I have now, that I've spent quite a long time researching to find, I probably wouldn't have been quite so ill. And I think the same still applies to an awful lot of women.
Yeah, it's still ongoing now. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and it's I mean, I don't let her on social media, but it's awful what's on there targeted at young people nowadays, telling them that they still need to take up less space. And it's a worry, isn't it, when we want them to be active, and yet they're encouraged to eat less and not have that energy to fuel them.
And skinny talk is now a thing as well, and it does sadden me, but I also, I do try to be a positive person in terms of what we can do to actually affect the change around us. And again, it's one of our sort of missions and purpose for what it is in terms of improving the education around women's health and women's nutrition. But yeah, it does still sadden me, because you still hear, I've got a 10-year-old daughter. We both have 10-year-old daughters, and they come home from school and they still do sort of the annual weigh-in at school for their health checks. And that fixation with numbers from a very young age over what a healthy age is. I'm like, well, I don't want my daughter being weighed at school. I'm sorry. I don't, because her value and her size and place in this world is not determined by that number on the scale.
Yeah, and what does that even mean? What does BMI mean anymore? It doesn't have, it's pretty arbitrary in terms of what it means as an indicator for health. And I don't really understand why we still use it. And there are articles out there that evidence the lack of integrity of BMI as a health indicator. And so why are we still weighing our children? And I don't really understand that. It doesn't indicate anything really.
Yeah, it does sadden me. And again, as someone who's always had a BMI that's never been in a healthy range, even when I've lost weight and I've been the skinniest I've been, and a size 10 I think was the skinniest I've been at one point in my life, but still the scales would still put me on an overweight perspective, and it's just so unhealthy. And a lot of that is down to those formative years as well, all that time spent in the pool, the broad shoulders, all of these things that have defined genetics, plus then the nurturing element of how I grew up. It doesn't mean anything. So yeah, we're very mindful from a parenting perspective that we are controlling those positive messages that go down to our children as much as we can. And again,
so how do we control those messages that we tell ourselves then? Because like you were saying earlier, Catherine, you got into your running and you were doing really well, and then you lost confidence. Why does that happen at this stage of life, even if you've been runners for years, do you think?
Well, for me, my losing confidence in running actually kind of came because I had children, and then physical factors got in the way and I wasn't able to get out and do it in the same way. And then I had, all of those associations of postpartum bodies, etc., and not being able to do it. So I was very much driven by the fact that, well, I've got 2 young children. I'm massively overweight at the time. It felt like too big of a mountain to climb. I couldn't carve out that space for me. It was only when the children got older, and then when things began to change a little bit, and time freed up a bit more, everyone slept a bit more, that I actually decided to start doing something about it. So my sort of break in running came in my 30s as opposed to my 40s. I think for me, though, the time where I nearly stopped again, which is when Pippa sort of came in and interjected, was because of that frustration around performance. And not, it's very easy when you're on an upwards trajectory. Like if you go back to running after a break, everything feels new again. You're hitting great times. Your performance is on an upwards curve. And then when you plateau, it's very difficult then to continue and find that motivation. So it's either that I stopped and I knew I didn't want to stop, or I did something differently because I wasn't seeing changes in my performance. And then changing that mentality around how I approached running was really important for me.
Yeah, so it's changing what we do really, and how we train, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I guess is what you've been trying to help with, Pippa. So tell us about your trail running retreat then. So when and where is it happening? What's going on there, and how can people get involved?
So we're in the Cotswolds. So we're in a lovely, hilly, undulating part of the country. So the retreats are going to be based in the Cotswolds around here. So trails that we know really well. But the benefit as well is that they are perfect trails for people that haven't done trail running before. None of the terrain is overly technical, so you don't have overly steep ascents or descents. It's, like I say, it's undulating. And then the most difficult terrain is very, very deep mud, and lots of puddles, and wading through knee-high water at times. But we know the Cotswolds really well. The trails are stunning. You can't do a run really that doesn't encompass amazing views and chocolate box villages. So we're perfectly placed to offer something for that sort of beginner market. So we're operating a weekend retreat initially, which is going to be the first weekend in October next year, or 2026. So it will be running from the 2nd to the 5th of October, and we've got a beautiful self-catering Cotswold property, massive rambling barn that we're taking over for the weekend. So we'll be taking people out on the trails every morning. What we want to make sure is that we're catering to all abilities through that. So it is open to beginners, but also we are opening it up to people that want to enhance and improve their running and their endurance on the trails. So we do have access. Obviously, we've got Pippa. I'm in the process of securing run leader qualifications as well. But we will have other run leaders on the retreat as well, to really divide the group up based on ability, to make sure that everyone gets the experience that they want. From an inclusivity perspective, the beginner group will have towel walkers as well, to ensure that if anyone gets left behind, that they're not left behind. So it's genuine inclusivity. I can remember going on hiking holidays previously, and it being billed as sort of inclusive, and being at the back of the pack and sort of panting to catch up with everyone and everyone waiting for me. And then as soon as I got there, everyone continued. So, it wasn't really inclusive in that sense. But no, we're very keen to make sure that everyone has a place. There obviously will be sort of some minimum fitness requirements in terms of, we do expect people to be able to cover the distance of 5 miles with a pace of around 20 minutes. So i.e. a reasonably brisk walk across trails as a benchmark entry. And then, as we said, Pippa will be there providing nutritional support throughout the weekend. So those workshops will be really interactive and practical, so people can take away genuine skills that will help them carry that knowledge forward in their daily lives. I think Pippa mentioned before that we're bringing Angie on board as well, who's won and placed in various championships from both a running, duathlete and powerlifting perspective. But her passion, she's through the other side now of menopause, but her passion is very much supporting women as they grow, as we go through this period, really. And what she wants to deliver as well is that help women feel equipped to, we understand that we need to start lifting as we get older, that's generally an accepted norm now, that we need to start lifting heavier as we get older. But then
I don't know if it really is widely accepted. I think it might be in our world, but
yeah, maybe.
I think in the grand scheme of things, the people I speak to are generally quite naive to that still.
Yeah, we live in a fitness bubble, don't we? So yeah.
I'm probably taking that from what floods my social media all the time. So absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Probably we are still in a bubble around it. But for me, the tension point, particularly on the strength side, is you spend all your time as a runner doing strength conditioning to understand how to make sure, to prevent injury or return from injury, etc. So how to balance that alongside that emerging requirement to lift heavier as you get older, and how to fit it all in a sensible, sustainable way, and where to start.
And why you need to do that, and what the importance of that is.
Because there's a fear, isn't there, of being bigger, becoming bigger, and that's realistically not going to happen, is it?
But no. And I think also from a runner's perspective, especially from my perspective, if you are an established runner and you enjoy your running, fitting a heavy lifting in around your run sessions and avoiding that empty, heavy legs, loss of performance feeling the next day because you've gone too hard in your lifting, and not being strategic enough about where you put it in your training plan. I think that's a barrier that has been a barrier to me for many years. I've sort of cracked it through Angie's help now, but I knew that strength was something that was sorely missing from my training plan, and if I didn't manage to nail it, I wouldn't be moving up to the next level anytime soon, and would probably end up with some sort of injury sooner rather than later. And so I think people have all sorts of different barriers to strength training and lifting, not sort of let alone how they do it. How do you start, and how do you lift safely? There's lots of worries and fears around that. So we felt it was really important to have someone like Angie on board, to help people start to find out how they can do this and make it sustainable into later life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from a lifetime of doing body pump classes. I'm sure that probably resonates with a lot of people as well, but how to move from that sort of body pump, I know how to lift weights mentality, to actually what it really means, and how, what you need to get started and how to start. And
I think the beauty of it really for people who are busy in midlife is actually to lift effectively. You don't need a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of time as long as it's effective. And it's just sort of initially helping people to understand what they need to do. But I was amazed at how little time it really takes. and how few exercises you really need to know. So it's really valuable, I think, her part in it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What difference have you noticed strength training has made to your training, Pippa?
Well, so my hand was slightly forced, I'm not going to lie, because I ran till I was 35 weeks pregnant with my little one. And then my pelvic pain and issues got in the way, and I just didn't feel it was safe anymore. But I didn't want to do nothing, so I started strength training. I had been strength training since early in pregnancy. I decided that needed to be a factor. But it has enabled me, for me specifically, it's enabled me to bounce back really quick, with no negative effects. My pelvic floor works fine, thank you very much. And I'm hoping it always will be. It always will be working fine. But also I am running faster times than before I was pregnant with him. I think pregnancy seems to have, like, or the postpartum period for me seems to have a kind of, it leaves me with a bit of grit and a bit of kind of, maybe because I've had to have some time off, or I don't know what it is, but after I started running after my daughter was born, and it sort of gave me what I needed to get to half marathons and marathons, and now this is sort of 8 years later, the same things happened, and it seems to springboard me to the next level. And this I took Angie on board as my coach probably when Francis was 6 months old, I guess. And no, maybe 10 months old. And just having her on board and helping me work out how to lift safely. I mean, my training has gone to the next level, really. I'm now looking at I've got close to my half marathon PB that I set 6 years ago. I did that in September, and on Sunday I'm hoping to run a 10k PB. So it done with appropriate timing in a sustainable training pattern. It can really really elevate your training capabilities.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear, actually. Yeah, that's brilliant. So you're still getting close to those PBs and hoping to create new ones now. That's fantastic. I just want to reiterate, we don't need to be doing that in midlife, do we? We can still go out and enjoy running just for running's sake as well.
Well,
And I think you've got a really good balance between the two of you there.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I think, where you were talking about lack of confidence, I think everyone has been through those times, and I certainly have, especially when I was approaching the Europeans the first time. I was definitely I was way through my stretch zone into the panic zone, and I was having like multiple meltdowns about turning up to my training sessions, and I had to be, I think each time I have a period of that I find really tough, I have to be really tough on myself, because it's I think it's so important to remember, for the majority of us, we're not getting paid for this. This is pleasure. This is what we do to chill out, and this is something that has to lend itself to our well-being. And so I said after Poland, well, A, thank God that's over. But B, I'd pre-qualified for the next one, and I was like, oh crap, what am I, and I was like, okay, I have to contract with myself here. If I can't show up and be sensible about this, I'm not doing it at all. Like, there's no point. We're age groupers. We have to pay to turn up to these things. It's not cheap. It takes time away from family, away from career. You have to choose it, and it has to benefit you. And so I said to myself, I think it was a blessing in disguise that I had to take a pregnancy deferral, because it gave me a really good time to sit and reflect. And in that time, I said, right, if I can't turn up and thoroughly enjoy it for what it is, and just be thankful for the fact that I'm over 40 and I can still do this stuff. I'm still here and I'm still able to perform at this level. If I can't be truly grateful for every day I can get out there and enjoy what I do, I shouldn't be doing it, really. And it was that conscious choice of um, like, get out there and love it, or just don't complain about it. It's that when you bring it back. I remember a story that put it all into perspective, and it was a girl that I used to go to school with, called Claire Danson, who is a triathlete, and she had a horrible tractor accident. I don't know if you're aware of her, but she basically she had a spinal cord injury, and she was about to get her pro license, I believe, and was an amazingly talented age group athlete. And she's now paralyzed from the waist down. And she's on my Instagram still, and she has such an amazing story, but also outlook to her life and the things that she's still an athlete. And she still competes, and she has the most amazing determination. But I look at a story like hers and go, we can still do everything we want to do, and that there's so many influences. I think when you get into the sports world, there are so many influences like that you can take strength from. And they're the people you need to look to for confidence, I think, to keep on plugging.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like both you ladies are in a really good place with your running, and that's wonderful to hear. If a listener out there now is struggling with confidence or midlife overwhelm or with the body changing, what would you want them to hear today to help them?
Are you going to let me? I think that it's really important to know that even on the most rubbish of days, that everything is temporary, and that there are a lot of things outside of our control that we need to let go of, but also to recognize what is in our control, and to really make sure that we take action on those, and to remember that in every situation we have something we can choose. We always have a choice. And I think to own those choices is really empowering. Even when you feel like you're up against it and you don't have time to train, or on that particular day, or you have responsibilities from all angles, to make a plan for the next time you can train and for the next week or so, and can put you in an entirely different mindset to the one that you're in now. And actually that's a choice. And it helps. I think that sense of control and being able to own something in any situation is really powerful.
Yeah, that's wonderful, wise advice. Thank you, Pippa. Anything to add to that, Catherine? Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, ladies. That's been such an interesting conversation. I can't believe we've chatted about that for an hour. There's so much more we could say as well. Listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this and how you're impacted in midlife with your running. You can find out more about the Trail and Bloom retreats. I'll put the links in the show notes for you. And as always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do share it with somebody else who might need a bit of encouragement today. Thank you for listening to the UKRunChat podcast, and we'll see you next time.